First, by way of introduction, I am Jeff Anderson, one of the attorneys for the survivors. To my right, of course, is Mike Finnegan. And to my left is Ann Fern, one of the survivors, courageous survivors that has stood up. And to her left is one of the courageous supporters, her husband, Jim. And to my far left is Jim Keenan. Jim Keenan is the chair of the Creditors Committee, which is composed of the committee that represents the survivors in the Archdiocese of Bankruptcy, and a survivor with whom we've been working in litigation against this Archdiocese now for 14 years.
Yeah, give or take one.
We're here to explain for the community and the survivors, particularly that the survivors that stood up and shared their truth and had the courage to take some action, involving the horrors that they've endured in and around the Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis, deserve credit. And the reason they deserve credit is because they spoke truth and they withstood a real struggle. And today, the bankruptcy judge that has been presiding in the Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis bankruptcy issued a ruling. And the ruling that he issued rejects the plan that the Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis created to try to cram down their desire on the survivors. He also rejects the plan that the survivors and the creditors committee came up with as an alternative, saying, I'm rejecting them both. But what he did say in this order is that I'm going to order the insurance companies who refused to negotiate in good faith when we were in mediation before, and who refused to allow the survivors to get a fair and speedy outcome to their claims, are now required to go back to mediation. And not only the insurance companies are required to go back to mediation and get this thing solved and settled, but the Archdiocese is required to go back to mediation. And those settlements that the Archdiocese made with the insurance companies, without including the survivors, don't count. He also ordered that the parishes and their insurance companies participate in the mediation and in reaching a resolution. And I emphasize insurance companies, because every single parish that has been sued has insurance. And every single insurance company for those parishes, as well as the Archdiocese, refused to participate fairly and fully in the mediation, excepting two. And this order now requires those insurance companies, requires the Archdiocese and all of them to engage with the survivors creditors committee, and all of us to reach a prompt and just and speedy resolution. And so first we want to say to the survivors, those that stand with us here today, and more particularly those that have stood so courageously through this horrible saga that never should have been in the first place, and withstood the way they have been ignored by the insurance companies for the Archdiocese and the Archdiocese itself. We just stand in gratitude to you for your power and for your voice and for the truth that you've spoken. And I also want you to know that the order that the judge issued also acknowledges the power of the survivor's voice. And when the survivors submitted a plan, it was that plan that competed with the Archdiocese plan. And the Archdiocese, the judge then put the two plans to a vote. The survivors voted 94% against the Archdiocese plan. 94%. And the judge, in his order, on page 16, in effect says, because the survivors overwhelmingly rejected the Archdiocese plan, and in fact 94% of them voted against it, survivors, in this process, for the first time, at least by this court, your voice was heard. Your voice counts. And we, along with all the survivors with whom we're working and on whose behalf we've had the honor to work, and with the Creditors Committee, Jim Keenan being the chair of it, we are going to work to bring this to a speedy, but also a just and fair resolution. And we will work day and night, every day, to make sure that that happens, and everything in our power. And we will engage fully with those insurance companies that refused. We will engage fully with the Archdiocese that turned its back on these survivors. We will engage fully with the insurance companies for the parishes and everybody else necessary to make a conclusion come that is both just and is fair. And to each of the survivors that stand with us today and have stood with us for so many years in this journey, because we worked with and brought suit on behalf of dozens of survivors who stood up under the Child Victims Act, passed in 2013, that ultimately brought suit against this Archdiocese that had concealed and covered crimes for so long. And it's those survivors that started this and ultimately pushed them to this reorganization where the Archdiocese tried to cram down a plan on the survivors, turned their back on them along with the insurance companies, and tried to get their way. And today, this signals the start of another way, a way where they will have to fully engage the insurance companies with the Archdiocese and with the survivors for the first time in this process. And I'm sad that it has been what it was, but I am grateful to the survivors for the chance to stand for their truth and the expression of their power, and know and have them know, and you know, that the survivor's voice counts. Jim Keenan, you are the chair of the Creditors Committee. That was the committee that was formed under the supervision of the Bankruptcy Court to represent all the survivors. And as the chair of that committee, what say you to this development today? And you've spoken before, but I think it's really important to hear from you.
Well, thanks for having me. It's only been about 2 hours since I was able to read the judgments. I have to say it's a little bit overwhelming and it's a little bit surreal, but page 16 really just speaks to it. You know, for a dozen years now I've been battling this battle, and I always try to make this point. Think about what we're fighting for. We're fighting against a religious organization about safety for children. Think about that. Should we ever have, as a society, should we ever have to battle a religious organization for the safety of children? And I have tried to echo this statement over and over. And today, Judge Kressel clearly said it was the voice of the victims that made this possible, that this plan from the Archdiocese, that they were so full-heartedly trying to cram at us and work against us every step of the way. This diocese has chosen to victimize the victims again by battling us. And most of the victims that I know want a very fair and just reward for their battle against what we shouldn't have to battle in the first place. And they want for it to never happen again. And that's where this case needs to focus too. This should never happen again. We're going to go back to the table, and we're going to mediate the way we should have a long time ago. My request of the church is that mediate fair. Mediate because you hurt children. Mediate because you want to make it right. Again, should we as a society and on any level condone a religious situation that allows children to be hurt, and then stands up and fights the children that were hurt. It seems absolutely ridiculous. But today's ruling is phenomenal for us. It's not the end game. It's a small little victory. It's a small victory because over 400 of us made our voices heard. That's what's important here. It saddens me at the same time that that's the size of victory we got. We're going to get a better victory. We're going to come to conclusion on this. We're going to find an end game that everybody is aware of. Hey, Jamie. That everybody is aware that at the end of the day, the settlements were fair and just. And they were such settlements that this will never happen again. That's the key. Kids have to be safe. I've said it 100 times. My parents never once questioned their son at 13 hanging out with a priest. In fact, they boast about it. They thought it was one of the greatest things. I've raised 2 boys. At 13, when they were off on their own, I always wondered, what were they doing? And I had to wonder on a whole new level. Many Christians got to celebrate last week singing, going to their church, seeing their friends, doing all the traditions that their religion allowed them to do, and they celebrated. That was taken from every victim. And that's something that you can't put a price tag on. That's something that unless it happens to you, you're never going to understand it. That feeling of driving by a midnight mass on the way home from family and you look and all you want to go do is kind of vomit a little bit. Because everybody in that church is really being swindled unless the church changes their ways. It's a bait and switch. We'll preach love and joy and peace and happiness unless you were victimized. And their way has not been to embrace us. We've been told that we don't count. We've been told we don't exist. Today we were told we existed. Our voice made the difference.
Jimmy Keenan, we're grateful to you. Jamie, come on up next to Jim. Come on up here, will you? Jamie Heutmaker is also a survivor who brought suit prior to the filing of the bankruptcy, among many other survivors with whom we worked, and has also been on the creditors committee representing the survivors along with Jim Keenan. And I know, Jamie, we haven't had a lot of time to discuss today's decision with you, but you now know that the judge rejected the Archdiocese attempt to cram their plan down on you along with the insurance companies that they were working with. And they rejected also the plan that the creditors committee put forward to compete with that. And the good news is, as you now have been told, that the judge ordered those insurance companies that would not negotiate in good faith, that would not even participate, and made some deals with the Archdiocese to cram this plan down, are now required to negotiate with you and every other survivor that you represent. And that your voice was acknowledged by his order. So we're going back, and we're going to be working day and night, Jamie, on behalf of you and these other survivors who have been through so much as children and through so much since the Archdiocese filed bankruptcy to avoid accountability, full accountability 3.5 years ago. So having heard that and having known that and having been so much a part of this struggle, how are you feeling today and what say you, Jamie Heutmaker?
Well, I'd say it's kind of a late Christmas present and a new hope for us as survivors as we move into the next year. I'm grateful that the judge did deny their plan, which my biggest concern in that plan was that the priests and the Archdiocese really weren't held accountable. And to me, that's the most important piece of this, is echo Jim. We need our kids to be safe, and that's the most important part. So as we move forward, and I understand how we're going to move forward better, that will still be the part that's most important to me, is to make sure that kids are safe this archdiocese, the priests, the clerk that have been accused will be held accountable, and that we can move forward with the world, the city, the archdiocese, a safer place for kids.
Well, we can commit to you, Jamie, and we can commit to all the survivors with whom we're working and who have struggled, that we will be working day and night to reach a speedy and a just conclusion. We will require now, the judge has, those insurance companies that refuse to participate, that refuse to work with the survivors and us, to now work with us and to reach a just and speedier resolution than otherwise could have been. So to you and to all of those that have stood up in private and publicly for your truth, shared this journey and the struggles and the pain as children and now as adults, we're just grateful for this chance to now reach and work towards some resolution. It can never end the pain and sorrow that was inflicted upon you as youth, and to any of the survivors that have survived. It can't. But there is a thing called justice, and there is a thing called truth. And justice delayed is justice denied. It has been delayed, but it will not be denied, because the survivors have spoken, and the survivors' voice has been heard. And we're going to do everything we can in our power to carry that voice and that truth to a conclusion in the bankruptcy of the Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis, so that there is a measure of accountability, the truth continues to be revealed, and we will do it as expeditiously as can be humanly done, and we'll work day and night to that end, as you have suffered day and night. Thank you all, and to all the survivors with whom we've had the opportunity to stand in this journey and the struggle. Thanks, my man. Okay, any questions?
Can you break down the difference between the two plans and include some numbers in that as well?
Well, look, the question is breaking down the plans. There are two competing plans. The Archdiocese plan provided for the insurance companies paying lesser amounts of money than they should have ever been required to pay, and let the insurance companies for the parishes out altogether. The survivors plan provided for all of them to be included and consolidated into a plan that would allow them all to be required to participate, and all the insurance companies required to do their fair share and abide by their obligations. That's the long and the short of it. It's a long and complicated bankruptcy case. The orders are very detailed, and it's all in bankruptcy language, but that's as simple as I can make that. And the bottom line is, both plans were rejected, and the insurance companies and the Archdiocese are now required to participate in a way they never had been required, and we will require them to.
But both plans total that 157 figure?
No, that 157 figure that was on the table in the Archdiocese plan is off. That plan has been rejected. It's dead. And now we're back at the table. And we'll let you know when there's more to talk about.
Can you summarize why the judge rejected the survivors plan? What were the principal concerns with it?
Can we do?
Yeah, Mikey, why don't you answer that one?
Sure. So the creditors committee, the survivors plan, the number one reason overall that the judge rejected it was because of the what he said was that plan would require too much time, too much costs, and would be a long process. And so what that plan essentially did was push all the insurance companies into litigation with the survivors, and the judge said that could take years and would cost a lot of money. And so that's why he didn't want that, and that's the main reason why. There were, on both sides, there were all kinds of reasons, but that's my takeaway from it.
Okay.
And we didn't want delay, but we had to, and the survivors, creditors committee had to come up with a competing plan to oppose the Archdiocese plan to show how unjust it was and give a path for some justice. But again, there would be delays, and so the judge rejected the creditor's plan, the survivor's plan, but also rejected the Archdiocese plan in large part because the survivors were so strongly against it, to the tune of 94%, and that it left the parish insurance companies and the parishes out of accountability altogether. And those insurance companies need to be at the table, as well as all the insurance companies for the Archdiocese. So that's the long and short of it. Final question.
Yes, it seems that along with everything you've been saying, the judge also seems to be criticizing attorney fees in his order, saying it's an extraordinary amount of money that they have agreed to pay, I assume you.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the memorandum also talks about everybody needs to give here. And he makes a comment about attorney's fees, and when he calculates the attorney's fees, it could be $30 or $40 million, and that the attorneys should participate in the reaching of a resolution. But to that comment, I can say this: the attorney's fees will always be compromised to reach a resolution, and they've never been an impediment to resolution in the mediation or in this case. They never would be. Because we have always, and for 35 years, I put the survivors first. And they will be first. And the fees, notwithstanding his comment, have never been the subject of contention or not a part of a negotiation to be had. And that will never be, nor has it ever been, an impediment to resolution for the survivors. Survivors first, 35 years ago. Survivors first today. Fees don't count. Yeah, Jim, do you have a comment on that?
I'll make a follow-up comment to your question, because I read that too, and if you look at the number, it's like, holy cow. But he also states in there that it's a lot of money for filling out forms. And as a survivor who has battled this for 12+ years, a battle I could never do by myself, I would just like to go on record that they do more than fill out forms. And without these two out front fighting where they weren't welcome and taking all the heat that they've taken and proving things that nobody wanted to see. Nobody wanted to see the cockroaches when the lights went on. And these guys keep their hands on the light switch. So I would like to just say, I think they're worth their weight in gold, because they are the people who are getting us where we need to be. And unfortunately, that's the system we live in. The best system would be every victim could have gone to their diocese at the point, tell them what happened, be believed, and made it right at that time. I'll remind everybody in this room, the priest who abused me abused his first victim in 1961. I was not born until 1967. So you guys try to figure out why I even met him. Because had he worked in any other industry, and everybody knew what they knew of this man, he wouldn't have ever crossed my path. So it's fortunate that we have attorneys that will step up and fight systems that allow that to happen. So what they get paid is what they get paid. And every victim who's worked with Jeff Anderson and any other attorney, you know that going in. There's no swindle at the end of the game. You're not false representation. So to that, I appreciate Judge Kressel's attempt to protect our wealth management in terms of settlement money, but I'll just leave it at that.
And I just want to say to this, to Jim Keenan, who was violated by Father Tom Adamson. And it was Father Tom Adamson in the Archdiocese that I first sued on behalf of a courageous survivor 35 years ago. That put me and us on this journey, working with survivors who shared their truth and had the courage to do it, and with whom we draw strength and inspiration every single day. And our common objective, and the theme that has brought us together in sacred bond, is every day we are working to protect the children in the future and do something to help ameliorate the wounds that have been inflicted in the past. Child protection first, helping the survivors in their own recovery of power and the acknowledgement of their truth. That journey continues, and we will not be stopped in that objective. Jamie, Ann, Jim, and all the survivors, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds across the state and across this country, for that end. And to that end, today is some progress. We got work to do, and we're going to do it right now. Thanks all.